I know Don and Nancy couldn't join us, and Shirley's now working in the evenings, so she's not here. I'm not sure where the others are. So we're going to talk about Islam today, and I will do my best to get through a lot of the basic structure and so forth of the religion, a little bit of the history, and I guess we'll get as far as we can get in an hour, and then then I'm sorry things are a little jumbled and we couldn't get the rabbi earlier, but we'll get the rabbi on the 21st, and we'll get the president of the mosque in Kenosha on the 4th of November. So I'm just excited that we have both of them coming. So
Yeah.
I think it's been really interesting to hear the speakers. So let's start where I've started with all the other religions, and let's see if we can share what comes to mind when you think Islam. What are our stereotypes or perceptions, characteristics? What do you think? What comes to mind?
Middle
Big
East.
question mark.
All right. Oh, why won't you type? I heard Middle East and something else. What was the other?
I said a big question mark.
Oh, question mark?
The Quran.
Spelled about 8 different ways. So
Yeah.
Oh, Mohammed.
and I can't spell any of these people's names because I think that's wrong. 1 H, 2 M's. What else?
Honest, a peaceful people.
A large number of people.
Mecca.
A bunch of men sitting on rugs.
Bunch of men sitting on a rug?
Yeah,
Kneeling.
that's what
Hey.
they do. When they pray,
There you go.
you know,
Pray, yeah,
We could say men praying on a rug.
right.
yeah, well,
5 times a day. Well, and
5 times a day.
actually the women do too.
But that's what she thinks of. So
Okay. And-
also
and-
on a
yeah,
rug.
they do too, but they're separated. Men
Right.
and
Right,
women.
right.
Yeah.
So they get 2 line items.
I just think
Another thing, and this is also going to be weird because I've been in a mosque in India, and there was this screen carved out of marble. It had holes in it, and people would tie strings in the holes of the marble for prayers.
Hmm.
And I automatically think of that when I. Oh.
What else?
Abraham and Ishmael.
Hmm.
He just took the course.
No other stereotypes, no other.
actually terrorists. You just have to, jihad, yeah.
Let's just say it.
Yeah, I said it.
Thank you. With the Taliban.
Mhm.
Jihad.
Prayers throughout the day and the call to prayer.
I think it's 5 times a day.
Yep.
What is the one in the morning? Early in the morning.
It's the first one.
Yeah. You mean you're just gonna call it the first one? Oh, okay.
They call the
Jeez.
prayers like a sheep's horn.
Yes,
I
they
don't-
have a.
4:30 in the morning or.
Yeah, it's really early.
It was-
Really
I want to
early.
say it was 5 when we were in Jerusalem, but
Yeah.
yeah. Anything?
Oh, gosh. No.
What else? Good, bad, or otherwise?
The funny hats. They're like skull caps or something. I don't know what they call them.
I think, aren't you thinking of the Jews?
No,
Skull caps?
Muslims wear those too. I've seen, well,
Okay,
I'm not making it up. I saw it.
okay. We'll have to ask our Muslim guests then.
Really works.
Funny head cover. Okay. Hmm.
All right.
Women dress in clothing that covers them up.
Baka? Baka?
Depending on where they are, they have different things they are required to wear.
Right.
We said it. Oh,
Or
Vermont-
choose to wear.
What, Dina?
I said, or choose to wear.
Or choose to wear, yes.
Mhm.
Their head covering, the hijab that they,
A mosque.
okay. So we know Carol's visited a mosque. Has anybody else?
We have,
We have the Blue Mosque.
What was that? Where?
The Blue Mosque in Turkey.
in Istanbul.
is-
Ah.
Did we visit one in Israel?
We were at the outside. I don't remember ever being allowed to go inside.
Okay.
Did you, Dean, Diane, did you get to go in?
Yes, yes, we
You-
did.
Participate in a service at all or see a
No.
prayer time or?
Oh, it was just a time that they let tourists in, but we had to have, our knees had to be covered and our
shoulders.
shoulders had to be
Head,
covered.
shoulders, and knees. And
Knees
toes.
and toes? Head, shoulders, knees and toes?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and no shoes.
you had to leave your shoes at the door.
Right. Okay, so that's a good place to start. It's interesting that Islam is so very similar to Christianity and Judaism, and yet it's so misunderstood and not understood. There are many more Muslims than there are Jews, and yet it's really become, it feels to me like it's become a religion to be feared and to be avoided rather than to be conversed with and to be understood. And that's a shame because they're really, as Teresa said, it really is a peaceful religion. But it's gotten kind of a bad rap because of the terrorists, probably like Christianity was during the Crusades. Oh, those evil Christians. Kind of how we think of Muslims, or society depicts them in too often, way too often. The best statistics I could find recently say that there are 1.9 billion Muslims in the world, which is about 24% of the population. So to compare that, Christianity has 2.4 billion and about 31% of the population. So, and really by and large, Muslims are growing and Christians are shrinking. So I'm gonna see if I can share. Oh, maybe I can't. Did I lose it? Where did it go? Maybe I'm not gonna share it. No, maybe I just have to get to the right page. So here's our world map. So you can see the countries that are in like this orange. Can you see this?
Mhm.
Last time I shared this, we had a hard time. the countries that are in that orangey, rusty kind of color, those are all like 100% Muslim. And then it kind of goes down from there. So if I click on them, I can find out what things are. So that's Kazakhstan on there. That was less, a little bit less. That had 13 million. But it's fascinating. All of these upper African countries are all like 100% Muslim. Indonesia has 229 million Muslims. Even Madagascar, I was looking at, had over 2 million Muslims. So we've got, if you look at the US, we've got 3.4 million Muslims, which compared to some of those other countries it's a really small percentage compared to some other places. So just to give you an idea of where the concentration is. So just another odd fact I found today was that, remember how after 9/11, the violence against Muslims really spiked? Well, it spiked worse than that in 2016 and 2017. Just FYI.
Why?
Why? I could only suspect it was because of the election.
Ah,
Violence against all kinds of minority groups went up right after the election. And so I'm assuming that was another one.
Here in the US?
Yep, here in the US
Okay.
specifically.
So do you think it will also go up with this election?
Depends who wins.
What'd you say, Dean?
Yeah.
Depends who wins.
Yeah, it depends on who wins. I really hope not. I have a terrible feeling that it's not going to matter who wins, that violence is going to erupt after this election regardless. So, but I don't know if it'll be targeted or just be kind of all out craziness. Anyways, so a lot of people get confused. Islam is the name of the religion. If you practice Islam, you are a Muslim. Okay.
Oh.
And Islam means specifically peace and submission to the will of God. It really, the intent is to be a peaceful people. They have the same kind of greeting that we have in Christianity, that Jews have. When we pass the peace, if you will, certainly Catholic, if you've been to a Catholic service, they're more specific about passing the peace. When we shake hands, when we greet one another, it's an act of peace. When Jews greet each other on the Sabbath, they say Shabbat Shalom, which is Sabbath peace. Muslims say Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. So it's interesting that even all of our greetings, our Sabbath greetings, are really filled with peace. And to be a Muslim means that you are a peacemaker and one who submits to the will of God. So interestingly enough, the first mosque was opened in the US in 1922 in Chicago. This is sort of a comment that's just going to hang out there, but there always seems to be this concern that because of the terrorism, that if we have Muslims on, U.S. soil, that there's this fear that they're not going to be, have an allegiance to the country. And yet there are so many who serve in the military, and it's actually part of the tenets of their faith to be loyal. It's in their scripture, in their bylaws, whatever you want to call it, be loyal to the country you're living in. So it's very clear, wherever you are, you owe your allegiance to that country that you're living in. So to kind of just give you a background, if you haven't had the background, or maybe you don't remember, if we go back prior to the birth of Muhammad, which was about 570 CE, so the Common Era, so almost 600 years after Jesus, okay? If we go back prior to that, and we go back to, was it, Marilyn said Abraham? So do y'all remember the story? Abraham had 2 sons, okay? And we had Isaac and Ishmael, and Isaac becomes, it's the tree. So Isaac becomes the father of Judaism and Christianity, and Ishmael, who was the child of Abraham and Hagar, who was the mistress, if you will, the slave wife, they get kicked out because Sarah's jealous. And because God loved them, the story goes, God promised that Ishmael too would be the father of a great nation. And Ishmael becomes the founding father of Islam, but not until many, many, many years later. So his story kind of ends there in the Old Testament, and picks up in the Quran. Part of the story in the Quran says that Abraham visited Ishmael many times after he kind of kicked him out of the clan, but would go to visit them, and together they built a house of worship on the spot that supposedly Adam had first worshipped. And that structure is called the Kaaba. And that's that black box looking building that you see them circling when they do their pilgrimage to Mecca. They consider it to be the first worship spot of their ancestor, the father of their religion. And so it's very, very sacred to them. And we can kind of get back to that, but it's interesting how stories pick up in different places. So nothing really happens in those years. There's many, many, many years in between Ishmael and Muhammad, where even that worship space, the Kaaba, was used. It was on a trade route, and it was kind of used for anybody and everybody's idols. So eventually, when they clean out the Kaaba, there were like idols from 360 different religions, indigenous religions. But there were also images of Jesus and Mary, which is fascinating. But eventually, it's all cleaned out and kind of taken over by the Muslims. So Muhammad, hi Sharon. Muhammad is born in about 570, and his father dies, his mother dies, and he's left to be raised by an uncle. And his uncle set him to shepherding. But one of the things that he did as a youth, and he was known for being very thoughtful and trustworthy as a youth, by the way. But as a young man, he managed the caravans for a beautiful, intelligent, and wealthy woman named Khadijah. Now, when she was 40 and Muhammad was 25.
Okay, let's go.
She offered to marry him for his good qualities. I'm getting hot here. I got to take my shirt off. Hang on. So he marries her, and this is a really good, if Muhammad's a role model for a lot of things, he's one of those things is that he really respected women and powerful women. This was her caravan he was taking care of. She was his employer. So, but she took really good care of him and became one of his strongest supporters. One of the things that was sort of in their culture to do was to take retreat, probably just for the men, because women didn't get time off to go on retreat, right? So the men could take, spiritual retreats, and spend time praying and studying and whatever. And Muhammad was apt to do that. He was a very spiritual guy. And it was when he was about 40 years old that he made one of these retreats. And an angel in human-like form, Gabriel, remember Gabriel from our own scriptures? Same guy, same angel, came to Muhammad and told him to recite. And Muhammad said, you know, I'm just a poor, you know, I never learned how to write. I'm not a speaker. I kind of said, I'm not the guy for you, and tried to hedge about 3 times. And then I think the angel got a little tough with him. Said, you will recite. And so he did. And so the words that came forth in that prophecy and in subsequent prophecies over the course of 23 years became the basis for the Quran and the basis for 2 other scriptures for Islam. One is the stories of Muhammad and then the sayings, sort of teachings of Muhammad. But he didn't have an easy time of it. So he came back from his retreat and he was a little freaked out and kind of went to his wife and said, you know, hey, honey, like this angel appeared to me, right? And told me to recite. And she supported him in it. She believed him. There were a few other people who believed him, including his cousin Ali, his friend who was a trader, Abu Bakr, and a slave. But he was instructed by the angel for about 3 years, and then he was told to preach. But when he started preaching the things he'd been hearing, he was ridiculed. And he was sort of, you know, shunned and persecuted and not taken seriously. His first actual convert was a dark-skinned Abyssinian slave named Bilal. So, you know, just another clue to the kind of person he was. You know, he marries an older woman who has some power. His first convert is a slave. He sees people pretty equally when it comes to spiritual terms. The slave becomes did I get that right? Yeah, his slave becomes the first muezzin, who's the person who calls the time to prayer. So 5 times a day, if you've been in a Muslim country, you hear over the loudspeakers in the streets, whatever they say in their language that calls people to prayer time. But the slave was the first one to have the honor to do that. So it took him a number of years of kind of working through so he was banished for 3 years then, and eventually he returned, and there was more persecution. So this didn't happen overnight. This happened over many years, and then when he turned 50, so now this is 10 years after that first revelation, when he turned 50, his wife died and his uncle died. So the 2 people who meant the most to him were lost to him. And it was at that dark time of his life where he's said to have experienced the night of ascension, which is what it's called. And the night of ascension was a mystical spiritual experience that he had, where he felt that he ascended through 7 layers of heaven, way out into the cosmos. He met former prophets and teachers all the way from Adam to Jesus. He saw paradise and hell, and he received the blessings of the divine. All of that is said to have happened on the spot where the mosque sits on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So that's the connection to that holy place, and why they've fought over that land for centuries. So probably long story needs to be shorter. Most of all of this took place in Mecca, but he wasn't really welcome there. And so they'd heard about this prophet in Medina. And so he went to Medina, where he actually helped them to organize their society. He like drew up constitution and administrative things and helped them to restructure and to be a stronger society in Medina. Of course, then Mecca got jealous because he was over there. And so there was this big conflict between the two cities, which he eventually sort of brought to a peaceful conclusion. And then he returned to Mecca in the year 630. So it took him all that time to sort of be recognized as a prophet and to gather more and more followers. Throughout all this time, he never claimed to have superhuman powers. So in Jesus, we could consider to have been a great prophet who people eventually ascribed to him superhuman, godlike characteristics and names and powers and so forth. It's always been very clear in Islam that Muhammad was just a guy like any other guy. It's just that he had revelations that came to him that he wrote down and shared with people. So the tenets of, I'm going to share my part of my PowerPoint here. Well, let me show you pictures of, these are recent pictures. Here's a picture of Mecca with people praying. I believe it can hold 3 million people.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I'm hoping they're not doing this today, these days.
Yeah.
What
So
country?
Mecca is, so keep this in mind when we talk about pilgrimage in a little bit. And then here's the city of Medina, the Prophet Muhammad Mosque. And you can see them again lining up and praying outside. Just huge, unbelievably huge. So these are the, like I said, just real quick, these were the writings that I talked about, the Quran, and then the stories of Muhammad's life are the Hadith, and the Sunnah are his sayings and actions. This isn't exactly where I wanted to go, but this is where we're going to go. Okay, so there is no room in Islam for terrorism. I had an imam come and speak to my class a couple of times, and he was very, very clear. Brought me parts of their scripture to reinforce all of this. Said Islam forbids all acts of violence and disorder. So this is one of their quotes, and commit not iniquity in the earth, causing disorder. Whosoever killed a person, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind. And Islam condemns aggression, hostility, and mischief. Help one another in righteousness and piety, and help not one another in sin and transgression. So there's no murder in the name of religion, color, or creed. Teaches respect and tolerance of people and their beliefs. And in Muhammad's farewell address, he said, God has made the lives, property, and honor of every man sacred. To take any man's life, his property, or attack his honor is unjust and wrong. None of you can be a true believer until and unless he desires for his brothers what he wishes for himself. And my movement is based on love. So the caveat to that is essentially that there is a line in their scripture that says, but if you are attacked, you have the right and the ability to protect yourself and to kill another person in that context. And so you will hear, in some of the conflicts in the Middle East, you will hear that twisted around, and you will hear some of the terrorists saying, well, but our beliefs were attacked, or our ideas were attacked, or our, whatever, we feel like we're under attack by the world. And so they've tried to justify it. It doesn't really work, but they've tried to justify it. Jihad has been that word that's been thrown out to mean holy war. But jihad actually means to struggle and to strive. And there are three different kinds of jihad. There's the greatest jihad, which is to fight against one's own evil desires, or the greatest jihad. So that, the hardest thing for any of us to ever do is to control our egos and our desires and our jealousy and our anger and our whatever. I talked last Sunday about knowing yourself, and how that's really the foundation of all things. So that's their greatest jihad, is to keep oneself in check. The greater jihad is about providing service to humanity and spreading peace in the world through the teachings of the Quran. And then the lesser jihad is a war fought in self-defense only, regulated by strict conditions. And that's what it says. Permission to fight is given to those against whom war is made, because they have been wronged, and Allah indeed has power to help them. And FYI, Allah is simply God in Arabic. It's not like another name, it's just the translation. I'm not going into that. So the 5 pillars of Islam are the foundation of what they base their religion on. And I'm going to go through these in a little more detail. So the Shahada is the creed. It basically is testimony that there's one God and there's Muhammad, God's messenger. So and this is recited over and over and over again. There's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. To be a Muslim simply means that you are willing to recite that and mean that. When I've asked the imams, I'm like, so is there like confirmation? Is there something you gotta go? No, you just gotta say that one line and you're good. Like, okay. Now maybe it was just that imam, I don't know. So salat is their daily prayer. Again, 5 times a day. So like really early in the morning, and then late morning, early afternoon, late after, dinner time-ish, 5 o'clock-ish, and then at night again before bedtime. Ablution means cleansing. So in every mosque, you will see a place where they clean their arms up to their elbows and their hands, and oftentimes their face and their necks as well. Some even have them clean their feet, which I suppose if people have really smelly feet, that would have made a lot of sense. If you're like kneeling down, you got somebody's feet in your face right in front of you. It seems like a practical thing when you really think about it. So they face Mecca when they pray. Typically their prayers are said by the imam or another trained leader, although obviously many Muslims pray in their homes. I didn't realize that there are actually, maybe not today because of everything that's going on, but I had a student who spent the day with a Muslim family, and they went to Penny's, and there was like a place in Penny's at the time where they could go off to the side and they could do their prayers. So I'm not sure how many of those places exist. Probably more than I am aware of, because I've never needed one. But it was nice to know that there were some places where they could do that. I imagine in airports and so forth, there are places where they can go to say their prayers.
I was in Egypt and in Cairo, and they were on the sidewalk facing Mecca and praying.
And that makes sense because that's a Muslim country. It's where do you go in the US
Yeah.
And that would be, somebody remember that question for when we have our speaker. You know, if you're out, or do you try not to be out at prayer time?
Seen them in the airports.
Say it again, Sue.
I've seen them in the airports.
Sure.
In a certain place or just in a corner? Or?
You know, yeah, they just put their prayer rugs down and pray.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they tried to find a quiet place, but I mean, there wasn't anything that said, here you may pray. They just found a place off that
Right.
and kneel, lay down their prayer rug and kneel.
It seems like lately, though, I've seen rooms that have been designated as I like meditation rooms or prayer rooms or something that's to
It's
that
like-
connotation.
It's off to the side. When you get off on, maybe it's level 3, it's the one for it's where you walk through for the really large parking area to the north. If you happen to park over on that side, not the south side of the parking lot, and if you happen to walk through this one area to gain, I think it's the access to the 3rd floor. We passed by one a year ago. I don't know if it's new or not, but it is. It's a prayer area or a meditation area.
Okay. So if they're in the mosque, women cannot be imams. So, but women can lead the other women in prayer, and yes, they are still separated so that they don't. It's funny because in my textbook it says they're separated so that the men aren't distracted. Clearly, women don't have an issue with it. I just found that amusing. This is it. This is just the motions that they go through when they do their prayer and say their chants. So zakat is the 3rd of those 5 pillars, which essentially means charity. So all Muslims are instructed to donate 2.5% of their yearly savings, not their income, to needy Muslims, or depending on who they are, to doesn't necessarily have to be strictly to other Muslims. But I have read that if you're not adhering to like the charity thing, that maybe your prayers aren't going to be heard so well. That's my my interpretation. Fasting is another one of the 5 pillars. Not only during Ramadan, but it's obligatory during Ramadan. They may choose to fast at other times. Ramadan is the month every year that commemorates the first revelations of the Quran to Muhammad. The intent is repentance and fasting. So Ramadan, because they follow a lunar calendar, Ramadan falls at different times of the year. It kind of cycles. So they're really lucky if it falls in winter because they have a short day to fast during. But if it's in the middle of the summer, they may be. I've talked to folks who got up at 2 a.m, spent an hour in prayer, got dressed, got ready, had breakfast at, before sunrise. The sun rises at 5 o'clock in the morning. They're eating between 4 and 5 and having a decent meal. And then they don't eat, drink, have sex, smoke from dawn until sunset. And if you're in one of those hot desert countries in the middle of summer and you're not allowed to drink anything, that's kind of rough. Now they do make exceptions for children and for people who have medical issues, for women who are pregnant, those sorts of things. So they're not heartless about it. But the intent is to draw your attention to how much you have, and to sort of have a bond between those who do have and those who don't. It's interesting, they said it provides one with a transparent soul to transcend, a clear mind to think, and a light body to move and act. That fasting fasting is done in all of the major religious traditions. It's just a little more, this is the only one that I'm aware of that sort of forces you to do that, and it's every day for a month. So you know, as a spiritual discipline, it can bring you an awareness of the present moment and a gratitude for what you have, and a mastery of your bodily desires. So Hajj is the last, I think, of the 5, if I can actually count to 5. So this is that pilgrimage to Mecca that I was, if you remember back to the picture, if you are able as a Muslim, man or woman, it's important that you try to go once in your lifetime. It's an expression of devotion to God. It's I think for anybody who's done any sort of pilgrimage, you have a different, it's a very deeply spiritually moving experience. It's a chance to connect with the divine, with a whole lot of other people who have that same need and desire. And you know that people have been doing this for centuries. It really connects you in a much different way. So men are obligated to dress in particular clothing, which is just basically 2 white sheets, sort of like a shroud. And from what I understand, many men will then save those and be wrapped in those when they die. But it's an attempt to, you know, you're not showing off your clothing or anything else. It's an attempt to have some equality among the pilgrims. So the rituals include going around the Kaaba 7 times, which is that, I wonder if I have here we go. There's the Kaaba. This is probably not what Abraham and Ishmael built, but is supposedly on the site where that was originally built. So it's to go around that 7 times, and then this silver thing it's on my right. I don't know if it's on your right. But it's a place where you can touch the black stone of Mecca, which probably was part of the original corner. It says the eastern cornerstone placed by Muhammad. So touch that or kiss your fingers and touch that. Probably also not another good thing to be doing during pandemic, but there you have it. The other thing they do is they walk this path 7 times between the Safa and the Marwa. So I don't know if you remember the story of Hagar and Ishmael. So they're sent out into the wilderness. They're kicked out by Sarah and Abraham, and she takes her child, and it's just her and the child, and she doesn't know how she's going to survive. She can't find water. She places him under a bush, and she goes out seeking water. And this is to sort of honor and remember her seeking sustenance for her child. She'd go only so far, and then she'd come back and check on him, and go only so far and come back and check on him. So sort of the going, 7 times between these 2 hills before God makes a well appear. So you can see the picture down below on the left. This is what it looks like. They've got it all enclosed, and you go up one side and down the other. They've got like the little express lane for the wheelchairs on the inside. And this is the well that supposedly God made appear for Hagar and Ishmael so that they could survive the wilderness. So we have a few minutes left. So just like Christianity is broken out into like a gazillion denominations, Muslims have also broken down into many, many denominations or sects, if you want to call them. The three major ones are the Sunni, the Shiite, and the Sufi. The Sunni make up about 80% of Muslims, and then you can see they all break up underneath that, and there's probably even more than that, and these are the major ones. The Wahhabis are the fundamentalist sect, the very rigid, strict sect. And then the Shiites make up 15 to 20%. The Sufi are the mystics. They're the mystical sect. I don't know if, did any of you go with me to the Sufi teaching school that's over here off of the interstate? I offered that up a couple times, and I've taken the quest classes there. And that's fascinating. I'd love for us to do that again. The mystical sects are always much freer and much more open. In Islam, if you go into a mosque, you will see that there are, and maybe you've noticed, even on the outsides of the buildings, there are no icons, there are no pictures. There are only, they have perhaps words or designs, but they're really very plain. You can go into a mosque and the walls will be plain and blank, everything done so that you are not distracted from your purpose of being there. And there may be chanting, but there's not music the way we think of there being music in a service. The mystical sect, on the other hand, has much more of that. The whirling dervishes, they're all Sufi. So it's all that sect, that dancing, one-on-one experience of the divine that transcends any of the rules and laws and everything else. Still have some of the same beliefs, sort of, but maybe someday we'll get to do that again too. So the breakup between the Sunnis and the Shiites were basically who gets to take over when Muhammad dies. Okay, so the Sunnis really took, I think his best friend took leadership of the Sunnis, and then there was his cousin who married his daughter, which is a little creepy too. And it's interesting because it said that supposedly, you know how you hear about when someone very spiritual passes away, that they've passed us. They say this in the Bible too. They pass on that spiritual power of theirs onto someone who's still surviving. It said that he passed it on to his daughter. And yet it was his daughter's husband then who took over the Shiite sect. So trying to think of, I know there are things that I probably should have said. Questions? Anything I can try and answer while I've thought?
Just a question. If the Islam are supposed to be so peaceful, why is their terrorist group so strong?
Because it's not about religion, it's about power.
Okay.
Power and money, territory, and they're using religion to that end. Any, in my opinion, in any war, religious war, anywhere throughout the centuries, it's not been true to the nature of that religion. And pretty much any Muslim who is not in that terrorist sect will tell you that they don't support that, and that it's a complete corruption of their beliefs, and it does a real disservice.
It just, I mean, of the guests that we've had, I mean, they're so peaceful and so loving and kind, but it's like the whole spectrum just goes to the whole other side, a complete 180 on it, and it's so powerful,
Right.
you know. I mean,
Well, and part of the reason they got so powerful is because the US gave them all kinds of weapons. So when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, we gave a whole lot of weapons to the Shiites and the people who were, and the terrorist groups. And once the Russians were out, they just turned on their own folks. So, and then we had to come back in and try and stop what we'd started. You know, I wish there were a better answer, but every major religion has, there is nothing in Islam that says you should convert the heathen, that you have to force your religion on anybody else. And I was never taught in any history class is that area of the world, when Europe was going through the Dark Ages, that area of the world was blossoming. You know, the science and the art and all of those sorts of professions, and what's the word I want, were flourishing. They really, mathematics and language and theater and all those sorts of things. It was a major metropolitan area. And we never hear about that. We never hear about the contributions to society that Muslims have made over the centuries. And it's too bad.
Yeah.
So the other thing I did want to say is that, so because they trace their roots back to Abraham, they fully believe in all of the Old Testament prophets. They believe in Jesus as a prophet. In the Quran, it talks about Mary and Zechariah. It talks about Jesus. We're running out of time, but I had marked a whole bunch of spots that, and it sounds so familiar. The angels said, "O Mary, indeed God has favored you and made you immaculate and chosen you from all the women of the world. So adore your Lord, O Mary, and pay homage and bow with those who bow in prayer." Then when the angel said, "O Mary, God gives you news of a thing from him for rejoicing, news of one whose name will be Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, illustrious in this world and the next, and one among the honored." I kind of wish, you know, we had a few things in there about some other religions so that Christianity were a little more tolerant. There's sort of the concept that there are prophets in every age, and it doesn't negate the prophets that came before. It's just, this is the next one in a series of prophets who all had great things to say about God and who were all striving to bring humanity to a heightened awareness and to bring peace and harmony and equity. And then once the prophets die, humanity kind of degrades again and stops listening to what they said, or twists what they said. Yeah, he was very much for women and equality. And then you can see how that's been twisted in some sects. So same thing happened with Jesus. I've heard instructors say that in every generation after Jesus, women's rights just kind of went further and further back to where they were before he was there. So Well, I recognize that it is like almost 8 o'clock and I know everybody's itching to go watch the debate.
Yeah.
Get out your bottle of wine.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Oh,
Scott's ahead of all of us. See, now that would have, that deadened the pain before it even starts. It's good. Oh. Anyways, thank you all for being here. Sorry that was a really quick rundown. I know there's more to go through, but hopefully we can hit some of it with our speaker.
Yeah.
All right,
Very-
you all have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.